If you're like me, you've been struggling to get Godot's UI system to behave the way you want. And quickly, I'd like to show you an easy method for creating a UI, like a menu. In Godot, UI elements are called controls, but not all controls are made equally. You see, we have this special class of control called containers. The difference between controls in general and containers can be broken down like this. Basic controls are flexible and simple, and containers are powerful but unwieldy. The problem is, we may think we need a container when we really don't. We may also be confusing a parent control node with a container node. They're not the same thing. So let's look at a useful example. The example is this. I want to make a menu with buttons in it. I want it to be in the middle of the screen. I want to lay out the buttons exactly how I want, and I want the menu to scale with the resolution of the game. Honestly, that's not much to ask, but let's try it, shall we? We'll start by making a mistake. So here I have a fresh project, and the first thing I need to do is make a new scene. So I have a new scene open, and I need to choose what the root node is going to be. I have an option of 2D scene, 3D scene, or user interface. I can go ahead and click user interface, but just in case you don't know, what you're doing when you click user interface is actually creating a control node. Okay? So a control node is the basic element, the basic UI element in Godot. And the very first thing that we want to do when we're making a UI is to make sure that our control node is set to full rect, that our very base root node is set to full rect. If I go to layout and I go to anchors preset and I set it to full rect, two things happen, okay? And it's important that you understand that these two things happen. The first thing that happens is our anchor points, these green points, are set to the four corners of our resolution. If you go in here to project settings, and then down to window, you'll see that the viewport width and viewport height are set in here. Our viewport is this blue rectangle that surrounds our 2D view, our 2D editor view. When a player changes the resolution of their window by clicking and dragging the corner of their window, they're changing the viewport resolution. We want to make sure our UI knows what that resolution is and scales to it. So we set our anchor points to those four corners. Okay? Now our control node also needs to be the same size as the viewport because we're going to start putting things into the control node, right? We're going to start adding our menus and buttons and what have yous into this control node, and we want to put them to start out with our base resolution. That may change later, and our anchor points will handle that, but we want our base resolution to match the control node size. And you can check that if you go into Control, under Layout, Transform, you can see the size is 1152 by 648, and that matches our viewport size. So first things first, your root node needs to be full rect, meaning its four anchor points are at the four corners of the viewport, and its size is the same size as the viewport. Okay, that's all correct. That's what you need to be doing. If you want to make a menu that scales with the resolution, a user interface that scales with the resolution, make your root node full rect. Okay, now let's make a mistake. I want to make a menu. So I need some sort of like window type thing with buttons in it, right? So maybe I'm new and I don't know what kind of nodes I need to use. I'm going to go to Control. I'm going to add a child node, and I'm going to go under all the control nodes, and I'm going to look to see, well, okay, I need something that has all my buttons and everything in it. And my eye is drawn to the very first thing on the list, which is container. That sounds like something that would have other elements in it. So I explore and I say, wow, there's all sorts of different types of containers. I'm going to choose one that I think looks like the best choice for my window, right? So I go through here, box kind of looks good. Go through here, panel. A window is like a panel with buttons on it. So I'm going to choose panel container. and I create it. And now my panel container, my 2D view is showing the properties of my panel container, which is its size, which is represented by this box, its 4 corners, which represent those 4 corners of the bounding rect, and also the anchor points, which are these green pins. Now I can move my panel around. One of my things I wanted to do with my UI is to have a window in the middle of the screen. So here's my viewport. I drag my panel to the middle of the screen, and then I resize it to be the size that I want. Okay? So going good so far. I need to add buttons, and I want the buttons to be laid out exactly how I want. So I'm going to add some buttons to my panel container. So I'll just search up button. I've got lots of options here. I'm just going to choose a basic button. And when I add it, something happens. The button is added to the panel container, and it looks as if my button is filling up the panel container. Okay, so I want to fix this. So I know that I can go down under layout for any control node, under transform, and I can change the size and position, but wait, I've got a problem. It's all grayed out. I can't change anything. All of it's locked out. If I scroll up, it says this node is a child of a container, but the important information is hidden. If I click the arrow, it says use container properties for positioning. Okay, so I have to go back to the container to change all the properties of the children nodes. So I go back to panel container, and I start looking around in the control node for any sort of properties I can change that will change the layout of the children nodes, and I don't find anything. I can't find the position and size of my button that I want to change. It's impossible to do. And it's impossible to do because I chose a container. And containers have predefined, very powerful but very limiting predefined behavior. The panel container takes whatever is a child of it and resizes and repositions whatever is a child of it to fill up that panel. Okay, so our button is filling up that panel. There's nothing we can do to change it because we used a container. We didn't want to use a container. We wanted to just use some other control node, anything other than a container. So let's go back, delete our panel container, and start over. What do we need to do? What do we need to do right? So we go to control node, add child node. And now I'm going to look under the controls. I'm going to avoid containers for now because I don't want their predefined behavior. What can I use to make a window? I'm going to make a panel. Now a panel is going to be the parent control node, but it's not going to be a container, right? So I've added the panel, click it, drag, resize. Awesome. We're back to kind of where we were before. I've got a window in the middle of the screen, add a child node times to add my buttons. I'm going to add a button, and look, I can move my button around. I can resize it to whatever size I want. This is far more flexible than before, and so far I've gotten the first 2 things that I want. I want to make a menu with buttons, and I want it to be in the middle of the screen. So let's see if it scales with the resolution of the game. So when I go into test, first I have to set my scene to the main scene, and then I have to save it. So here it is running in game. It looks good so far. We have a menu, it's got a button in the middle. We rescale it, and it doesn't look right. Here's the trick you need to know right here. Our control node is scaling everything inside of it according to the resolution of the game. So all we have to do is to tell our panel and our button where they need to be pinned to this control node, because they're living inside of this rectangle right here. So our panel is inside that control node's rectangle. We need to pin it to that rectangle like so. We're going to pin the 4 corners of our panel to that rectangle. And now when we run it, our panel will scale to the window. So we go in and we scale, and our panel should scale with the window, but notice that our button is not scaling correctly. So we need to go in to our button, and we need to take its anchor points and put them at the four corners of its rect as well, pinning it to the panel because it's contained by the panel. So as the panel resizes, our button will also resize proportionally. Now as we resize the window, our menu stays in scale with the window. And there you go. An easy way to create a menu or any UI element that scales with the screen. Don't use containers if you don't need the predefined properties of containers. General old controls work just as well. And remember to set your root control node to full rect for the screen. And remember for each of the children to pin their anchor points to the four corners of their rect. Good luck out there, guys.